Well, crippling cost of living remains the biggest issue facing most Australians. Financial pressure is, of course, one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, why marriages break up and families disintegrate. It's a great tragedy. Now, the state of the economy is a big worry for people living in the western suburbs of Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, major cities where there's high inflation and high interest rates. People are struggling to pay their electricity bills and their grocery bills. Life is very difficult for a lot of people. Joining me now to discuss this is economist Dr. Rod St Hill. Rod, thanks so much for your time. Last week it was reported that company insolvencies have hit record highs with over 6,600 businesses going to the wall in just the last 6 months. What does this tell us about the state of the Australian economy?
Well, look, I think it tells us in particular that the small and medium enterprises that we rely on so heavily are really doing it tough. They came out of COVID, I think, financially weak. And then since COVID, of course, they've had to cope with very high increases in their costs, not only of labour but of materials as well. And they're coping with higher energy costs. So it's pretty difficult, for example, to run a small restaurant. It's difficult to run most small businesses now. And I think we're seeing that a lot of those businesses are now either closing voluntarily or they are actually filing for bankruptcy because things have just got so bad they can't cope.
But Rod, the government tells us it's providing cost of living relief, not just to householders, but also there's been some electricity rebates for small businesses. Yet at the time this government largesse is kicking in, businesses are going to the wall. It's not working, is it?
No. Look, it never works. The government can never combat inflation by spending more money.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, Treasurer Jim Chalmers was on the news recently telling us that he's banking surpluses. There was a mid-year budget update recently. He says there's money that he's putting aside to retire debt. Should we all share his sunny disposition at the state of the nation's finances?
Well, I guess we can be grateful that he isn't spending it all, but the real issue is the size of government, and the government is bigger than it's ever been before. And so the total tax on production, which is what an income tax is, the total tax on production has increased. He's banking some of that, which I suppose is a good thing because he's not spending it. But the real issue, as I said, is the size of government. It's becoming really intrusive and it's creating inflation.
That's right. There's tens of thousands of more public servants since the Albanese government came to office. And of course, that national debt is nudging $1 trillion. Rod, the only sort of economic reform we hear about seems to be around negative gearing. Left-wing politicians, the Greens, Labor, are always saying we need to abolish negative gearing. A Treasury paper was done a couple of weeks ago. It was run up the flagpole. Albanese quickly denied that it was government policy, but clearly it's something the left is always pushing for. They say that it would solve the housing price crisis, but how so, given that people who have investment properties are actually helping supply housing and rental accommodation?
Well, the politicians cleverly don't tell us exactly how that would increase the housing stock, and of course it won't. And look, having an investment house is just a business decision. It's like any other business decision. And if you do happen to lose money on it, then you can write it off against other income. It's a principle in taxation that we've had for a long, long time, and I don't think we should disturb it. And of course, there are plenty of people who own rental properties who are positively geared. So they are paying taxes on it. It's a furphy and it won't do anything to improve the situation for renters.
It's really just the politics of envy, isn't it?
Oh, look, I think that's what it is. I think it's the old class warfare rearing its head because, frankly, the government hasn't got any good policies that it can share with us.
So we're going into an election year, probably early next year. The parliamentary calendar includes a March budget. What can be done to help the economy between now and March? What levers can the government pull to try and relieve our cost of living? I suppose they're just going to hope for an interest rate cut and then run to an election.
Well, I'm sure they will be hoping for an interest rate cut, and everybody is. But the Reserve Bank, I believe, is maintaining a fairly conservative approach to interest rates. And I think they're reluctant to have volatile interest rates. So they move as seldom as possible. And therefore, I think we're stuck with relatively high interest rates for a little bit longer. I don't know whether we will get a rate cut. between now and an election around, say, May or June of next year.
Do you think the economy is in such a state that it would be better for the Reserve Bank to keep interest rates on hold?
Look, the difficulty the Reserve Bank has is that it's got a government that is creating inflation, and it is supposed to be keeping inflation below the agreed target. And the only instrument it has is interest rates. And so where there are inflationary indicators in the economy, and this is particularly the case with, say, the cost of materials, the Reserve Bank will be reluctant to reduce rates for fear that it will soon have to increase them again. So my impression of the Reserve Bank over many, many years is it has a preference for low and stable interest rates, but when it can't have low interest rates, it prefers stable interest rates.
So Rod, what would your advice be to householders who are doing it tough, knowing that there's these forces that are out of their control? There's the government spending, which is out of control. There's the Reserve Bank, which is trying to counter the harm the government's doing to the economy. What can householders do to try and weather the storm?
Look, it's really, really tough. I know in my own household, which is just the two of us, we are far, far more careful now in making travel plans, for example. We try not to travel too much, so we do 2 or 3 jobs in the one trip. We're becoming quite miserly with our grocery shopping and so on, careful with our energy costs. I think it's one of those times when we've got to be, as it were, money pinchers. It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult for renters. It's very difficult for people who have recently taken out a variable rate mortgage. All I could suggest is do the very, very best you can to hang in there. Postpone as much expenditure as you possibly can. Interest rates will come down, but not straight away. I think it'll probably take another 6 months or so before we begin to see interest rates falling.
Well, Dr. Rodson Hill, always appreciate your analysis and your economic advice. Thanks for your time today.
You're very welcome, Lyle. Very welcome indeed.
Well, thanks so much for your company. This Saturday is the ACT Legislative Assembly elections in Canberra. Family First has 11 candidates running, including Elizabeth Kickett, a sitting MLA who was booted from the Liberal Party for her pro-family views. And in 2 weeks, it's Queensland's turn, and we have 59 candidates running there. It's so important that the values of family, faith, freedom and life are on the ballot, and I salute all the people who have put up their hand to run for the party. It takes courage in an age of cancel culture and woke ideology to stand up for mum, dad and the kids and for the pro-life message. Now keep up to date with what is going on by following me on X at Lyle Shelton and by visiting the Family First Party Australia website, where there is regular updated political commentary, familyfirstparty.org.au. Don't forget to make ADH TV your home of uncensored and common sense news and analysis. Until next week, keep pushing back and keep speaking up.